Creator Talk is a new show where I'll be hosting interviews with creators about their work and creativity and collaboration and much more. I'm stoked to be sharing with you now. I've been working on this show for a long time, and I'm excited to share conversations with all kinds of creators and builders and developers and visionaries and artists and musicians and inventors. And I'm thrilled to share the first episode with you today. So I interviewed Tadas Vaitiekunas, who's a visionary software developer and consensus builder who I work with often in the Eden+Fractal. He created a really cool new way for communities to cooperate and make decisions together. As Tadas put it, a way for communities to know what they think. This process is called Eden+Fractal, and it's a really innovative and elegant system that combines the benefits of Eden elections, where people break out into breakout rooms and elect delegates to help make community decisions, and the Fractally process, where people break out into breakout rooms and respect each other's contributions to help the community. So this process combines both these processes. We'll talk much more about it in the coming episode. You'll see it. And as Das and I shared, this process provided a revelation. It's really exciting, and I'm stoked about how this process can be used to help communities cooperate far better than ever before. And I'm stoked to share it with you too. For anyone who's not familiar with Eden or Fractal, some parts of the conversation might not make sense right away, and I'll share more introductory information in the future. We kind of jumped right into this. We weren't planning on making a podcast. We were kind of just talking about the details, but I figured it would be a really cool opportunity to start this Creator Talk podcast now, and I hope you enjoy. And I think a lot of it will make sense, and it'll be really interesting, and be patient with it. Stick around. I curated a page at edencreators.com/Eden+Fractal or edencreators.com/plus, where you can learn many more details about the Eden+Fractal process. Tadas also shares an excellent overview about it, and we have a really great conversation here. So I hope you all enjoy. A few things I'll say first too. The Eden+Fractal community has been meeting for the past 22 weeks now at the time of this recording, and the community adopted the Eden+Fractal process in week 18. So that was 4 weeks ago, and that's when we recorded this interview. You can watch all of the Eden+Fractal meetings on the Eden Creators YouTube channel, and you can watch the 4 weeks in which we cooperated with the Eden+Fractal for the first time, and you can also watch the time that we passed a proposal with the Eden+Fractal process for the first time, which was just this past week. We passed a proposal to change the time. So you can learn about that at edencreators.com/time, and there's lots more you can learn. I'll also say too, my understanding and appreciation for the Eden+Fractal process has grown greatly over the past 4 weeks after trying this process out and thinking about it more. I think that this has really profound potential to help communities. It's already been very helpful for our community, and I think it could be super helpful for many more communities. We jumped into this without plans for it to be released or recorded or the debut of the new show, Creator Talk. So it's a little bit ad hoc in the future. I'd love to do more interviews with Tadas and also many other creators and do a bit more introduction and see what drives people, see other interests and so forth. But for now, we're quite focused on the Eden+Fractal process. Tadas and I also did another great interview with Patrick talking about this process, which you can find at the link in the description. And there you can also find the edencreators.com/Eden+Fractal. And there are also timestamps in the description too, where you can navigate at your convenience. Lastly, I'll soon be launching creatortalkshow.com, so all of that will be here. But for now, I'll just say I'm very grateful to Tadas and for everyone in the community for helping people cooperate with this innovative and elegant and beautiful Eden+Fractal process. Enjoy. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our meeting. Tadas and I decided to meet up and have a discussion about the Eden+Fractal proposal and consensus mechanisms. And Tadas also recently published a very interesting new article about fractal blockchains. So basically, we figured it would be a good idea to meet up to discuss a lot of these different things. We've been thinking lots about all sorts of ways to reach consensus and help communities signal their opinions and so forth. And we've been talking for maybe like a half hour off recording, but then we decided that it was a good idea to start recording. Maybe this will wind up being like a podcast or something like that. We'll see. But anyway, thanks everybody for joining and listening. And then thank you very much to Das. I really appreciate you joining me and having this conversation. And I'm looking forward to discussing things with you right now. Thank you.
Thanks for inviting me. I always enjoy good conversations. So these topics, and I enjoy these discussions with you.
Cool. Sounds great. Likewise. So perhaps, and of course, Tadas, feel free if there's any direction that you want to take it. We're kind of winging this, by the way, just figuring that it's best to record something and we'll have a conversation and see where it goes. So of course, Tadas, feel free if there's any way you want to lead it in. But perhaps a good way to start is maybe if you want to just provide a bit of an introduction or an overview of the Eden+Fractal proposal. I've, of course, been studying a lot as well as many other people in the community, but many people haven't heard about it yet. So if you had to summarize it briefly. I know, of course, you've also shared the documents, so perhaps like we could, if we produce this, we could share the screen and make it easier. But would you like to just like try to just provide a brief summary and introduction into the Eden+Fractal proposal?
Sure. Yeah. So basically, before fractal process, where we reward rank people's contributions, there was and still is Eden process being used, where people have a very similar process, but we elect delegates. So, and one thing about Eden process, it's oriented towards electing delegates. It's oriented towards what people want to do in the future. Factory process is more about rewarding past contributions. And Eden+Fractal, it had a problem. It didn't have a consensus process. It basically didn't have a process for deciding what to do in the future. In the future, basically, what to do in that direction. So basically, Eden+Fractal proposal combines these two ideas, and I think that provides it the best of two worlds. So each week, besides ranking contributions, each breakout room elects one delegate. So all breakout rooms elect one delegate. So you end up having each council ends up creating each week ends up creating one council of all the delegates from all the breakout rooms that week, and we say that each delegate is active for 4 weeks. So at any point in time, it means that Eden+Fractal has 4 councils composed of a number, each composed of a number of delegates from that week. And we say that councils vote on proposals, and if super majority of council votes to approve a proposal, we say that council approved the proposal. And then if 3 out of 4 councils approve of a proposal, then we say that proposal is passed by Eden+Fractal. That's basically how it works.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you for the explanation, Tadas, and thanks for all the great work putting into this too. It was quite, the word that came to mind was a revelation, or rather a revelation. I'm never sure how to say that word, but and I don't know if that's overstating it, but it's something that seems like it's very simple and elegant, and I hadn't thought of it before, but it seems like it has tremendous potential for both like the current solving the problem of not having a consensus process, and it seems like long term too, like it could be really helpful. Like I'm still trying to figure out it. I'm still trying to scope it out and think about it, but it seems like it could potentially be a better model than the model that was outlined in the Fractally white paper, whereby there are 12 teams with who receive the most respect, and they receive and they elect team leaders, and then those 12 team leaders form a council. It's also a very interesting and elegant model as well, and I'm not sure what will be the if that will actualize now with the Genesis Fractal, with what's been happening in the recent weeks. But yeah, be curious. You mentioned like getting the best of both worlds, and I think you wrote in the Discord chat at some point that you think it might be better with the council of like combining this process with Eden+Fractal rather than just the pure fractal process. So I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about like long-term potential as this plan. Do you see it more so as like an interim consensus process that we can use for the coming weeks and coming months, and until something better is thought of or something? I suppose it'll probably evolve, like all plans and consensus processes do. But do, do, do you see this as having a lot of potential in the future as being like a way that a lot of communities can cooperate and reach consensus using this Eden+Fractal kind of consensus method? Or is it too soon to
Yeah, so
speculate on that?
yeah, first of all, I wanted to say the way you felt about this proposal when you read it, it being a revelation. That's the same way I felt about it too when I discovered it. Like for me, it was why did we previously not think about it? Because I think it's the most natural uh, consensus process for Eden+Fractal. Because Eden+Fractal has this history. People from Eden+Fractal has this. A lot of them have experience in Eden. We have experience in Fractally, and so I don't know. For me, it makes a lot of sense, and I do see a lot of potential for it being used in the future, not just as an interim, not just as a temporary measure, but as something long term. Of course, it's still an experiment. We haven't tried this yet. So who knows? But right now, I don't see why it wouldn't work long term.
Okay,
Of
cool.
course, we might have improvements in the future, but I think the basis it seems good to me right now.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm excited to try it too. We approved it. The supermajority of the Eden+Fractal group approved it this previous Wednesday. We're recording this on October 10th, and October 5th we approved it. So I'm excited we're going to be trying it out for the first time this week. So it seems like it has a boot up kind of period of like 3 or 4 weeks to get going, but we'll be able to actually elect representatives this week. And I believe that according to the proposal, we'll also do a 15-minute longer meeting. So rather than 40 minutes, we'll do a 55-minute meeting, during which time people have time to both rank each other's contributions to the community, and then also at the same time discuss proposals and discuss delegates to elect for those proposals. So
Yes.
that'll be exciting doing the first one in just a couple of days from now.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess uh, when you said that we will be electing, thinking about delegates to elect, I thought that this is one of the advantages of this process, as opposed to voting, because we will actually be discussing and reaching consensus that might create some new, better ideas than the two alternatives where we either vote for that or that. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. It can spark a lot of discussions. This morning I was rereading your Discord post. So I suppose that we'll share links in the description where you can learn more about this. But Tadas summarized in a Discord post about reasons why he likes this proposal. And one of the reasons was we'll organize discussions on proposals. Contributors will first discuss in the breakout rooms of groups of 6, which is much easier to do than in rooms of 12 to 16 people like we do now, or more. There was like 20 people in the last meeting. So in last week's meeting, like there was a bit of a commotion. We're trying to find a consensus process where we can both, schedule our time after the meetings and also figure out the best ways to deliberate proposals and so forth. And I do think that having this mechanism where people can be in small groups of 6 and talk about things, that's another benefit. There's many benefits of it too. You wrote out, I'd recommend if anybody hasn't read it, or if you have read it, to reread it to understand all the different ways that this can be helpful and help facilitate cooperation in the community. But I do think that's a really cool aspect of it, that in this upcoming meeting and then future upcoming meetings, then people have an opportunity and I guess a bit of a responsibility to discuss what the proposal could be like during the actual room. I don't know if responsibility is the right word because they don't have to, but for the benefit of the community, it's a good time and a good opportunity to discuss the proposals upcoming. And this process facilitates that because it naturally kind of inspires the discussions about, okay, well, now that we've decided about who's the top contributors and how much people contribute and so forth, now let's decide these proposals and who will best represent the group to make good decisions about this proposal or these proposals for the benefit of the group. So really cool.
Yeah. And it could be not just proposals. It could be like, where do we want the Eden+Fractal to go next? So we could decide that and then elect a delegate, which would organize the initiative to create new proposals, for example, or do other stuff that represents the people there. So it could be used that way in some weeks at least.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. One thing I'm wondering too, so I have some more specific questions about the proposal as well that I'd like to ask you about, like potential ways that it could be, I don't know, I guess broken or not work out so well, or potential modifications that could be made to it in the future. I love the proposal, but I also want to just make sure that it's as fit as possible to benefit the community. But I think first, before getting into specifics and potential improvements or potential design choices that you made and so forth, I'd like to ask about, in general, how you see this proposal, or I don't know if I should call it a proposal anymore because it passed, but this consensus process for Eden+Fractal alongside Consortium and alongside other consensus processes and consensus measuring tools and so forth. So I also made a proposal. I made quite a few proposals. So we've gone back and forth, and we've each made several proposals over the past couple months. And last week you shared the Eden+Fractal proposal, and then like an hour later, I shared a proposal for a voting system where people could vote on Consortium using the Eden tokens or the votes tokens that are equal to the Eden tokens. And the Consortium is an amazing tool, and Vlad is building it. Vlad's been building it for a long time, and enables people to signal their preferences using tokens on the tool. And then after seeing your proposal, I realized that I like both of these proposals a lot. I really like the Eden+Fractal process because it brings a lot of unique benefits, some of which we talked about, many of which we haven't yet. And then also Consortium has many benefits as well. And so I think they can work together. And I also wrote a bit of an article at edencreators.com/consensus, which summarized why I support both proposals, summarized both the proposals a bit, proposal to use Consortium and the Eden+Fractal proposal, and talked a little bit about like what consensus is and how consensus is like a opinion, but at the same time, like we need to respect each person's personal property and respect the right of the individual to opt out if they don't want to as well. So the way I see it is like these are both Consortium and the Eden+Fractal process are signaling mechanisms and like consensus building tools, but they're not like binding or like they're not obligating people to do things. And so I see that they both can work together as signaling mechanisms. And eventually, once we have like the technical capacity to build smart contracts that that also update dynamically the permissions for things like the smart contract of the EOS account or for like a website or different things like that, then I think that the Eden+Fractal process could like perhaps just entirely on its own have formal power to do things like that. But right now we don't have that technical capacity. So I'm seeing both the Eden+Fractal process and Consortium as tools for measuring consensus, which we all want to cooperate and benefit. And when we have these better tools to measure consensus, then we can better tell what people want. And then people with formal power, like on the MSIG or whatever, can take those into account and should to benefit the community in most cases, but also have like the right to do what they want and opt out if they don't want to. So that was kind of a lot. I'm just trying to explain this and also trying to figure out in my head as well. I'm working on explaining it better, but I'm wondering, I know you read that, and then also you kind of wrote a little bit of similar things in the Fractal Blockchains paper, which I'd love to get into at some point as well. So yeah, do you have any thoughts about this in general? And do you see it the same way I do, or do you see it in a different way? Would you like to elaborate?
Yeah, definitely. I really liked your like description of it as consensus signaling tools, because well, I don't know if it makes sense to present these. I don't think it makes sense to present these processes as somehow binding to someone. We don't even have a way to enforce if someone does not follow these processes, and I don't think that we want to do it. I don't think we are that kind of community which tries to enforce an individual to do something. So right now, I do think that it's correct to look at them as consensus signaling tools. They are basically means by which community can learn what it thinks as a community. Because if uh, without them, we just all have individual thoughts and we don't know what we think. And yeah, so I like the idea of seeing them as consensus signaling tools, and we cannot really have at this point we cannot yet give more like weight to them since we used informal processes to pass these proposals. So, but I think as we keep sticking with them, they will get more weight. Like like in law, you have precedent. It means a lot. Uh, and yeah, what else I wanted to say? Yeah, but one thing I keep thinking about is that I think eventually it will be easier for the community to like signal consensus on which consensus signaling tool is the primary. So basically, I think it will be easier for the community to decide as a whole that this is the primary consensus process and these are secondary signaling tools. Because otherwise it could get confusing. Like some people are following one um, consensus signal as the primary, others might be following another. So yeah, I think there will be benefits to having one consensus signaling tool, but at this point we are just both consensus signaling tools.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for sharing your thoughts there. And I agree. One thing you said really eloquently that I like is there are ways by which the community can learn what it thinks. And I think that's really cool. I've been thinking about this a lot over the past week or so. Like I made an analogy with thermometers and barometers, that thermometers and barometers, measure the physics of the room, whereas we also need to measure like what the room feels like in terms of like get a feel for the room. People say like what people think and so forth. And right now, like, and by default, humans are limited in their capacity to measure consensus. Like we have we have certainly a lot of capacity when we develop language and so forth, and the ability to write text and whatnot and get on Zoom calls, then we can speak about it and voice our consensus. But in many cases, like if only one person can speak at a time, like people can talk over each other, communities need better tools for measuring consensus and learning what the community thinks as a whole to be able to cooperate, especially when you get to larger scales. Even if 15 people in the same room, like having these tools, 15 people you can discuss and so forth, but when 15 people really care about something, then it can be difficult to understand exactly where everybody thinks about something. So having these different tools that measure consensus in different ways can be very helpful and insightful for like collective intelligence and community intelligence and communities to cooperate cohesively. So I think just in general, like I've written a lot of notes about that over the past week or so, and I think that's a fascinating area to explore that I never really thought about before. Like consensus, the word that came to mind was the art of consensus, the science of consensus. I don't know. And we don't have to get too much into the details about that, but I think it's a fascinating exploration. And like these are things that will really help communities to cooperate and coordinate better than ever before.
Yeah,
And
I definitely agree. I think I thought a lot about this too, and a lot. It Daniel's book More Equal Animals inspired a lot of these thoughts for me. Like uh, really power of consensus, what people can do if they are able to reach consensus and organize accordingly. So we could explore this topic more in the future, maybe.
cool. Yeah, sounds good. I'd be happy to explore it more. And also, yeah, absolutely. More Equal Animals, that was also quite a revelation and quite a continued revelation too. Every time that I read it, I get more insights, and it has a lot of the foundations of what we're doing here with reaching consensus, of course, as Dan Larimer and the formerly Clarion, now Fractal team designed a lot of what we're building here and kind of standing on the shoulders of giants with both the Eden process, the Eden election process, and the Fractal process coming together with the Eden+Fractal process, and then working with EOS and all these different things. So yeah, lots of fascinating things to explore. And overall, I'm really excited about how these tools and mechanisms and these principles can help people cooperate, because I think that's probably what the world needs most. The world needs like to learn to cooperate better. People need to cooperate better. And so I'm really thankful for you exploring these things alongside me and everybody in the community. I think it's awesome what we're doing here, and I'm really excited about it.
Me too, yeah. And by the way, I'm working on an Albedo update, and I think it will have another cool example like what can be done with consensus. So I can't wait to share it. I hope to be able to soon.
I'm looking forward to it very much. And I'm looking forward to, we're doing an interview with Patrick as well this week in just a few days. So that'll be coming out more, or that'll be coming out soon. And everybody can listen to that. Everybody can also listen to our former interview with Patrick that we did about a month and a half ago with myself and Tadas and Patrick for an introduction into Albedo. And then we'll also share some more links into the Albedo white paper. I know I've been listening to many of your meetings that I've been in with you, Tadas, or that Felix has been with you and Felix has been recording. And I hear that you keep saying that you're working on updates to Albedo, and it seems like you've been pretty consistently working at it too. So the first, from what I understand so far, from what we discussed and from what I've read, it seems like super helpful, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing these updates and learning all the new ideas that you have to share about it.
Yeah, me too. I can't wait to share them with you.
Yeah, you said something before too, about like primary consensus mechanisms or measuring tools and secondary. And so, yeah, I just want to touch upon that briefly. Like, I agree, like in many cases, it can be helpful to just simplify and just say like, this is the consensus process of the community. And at some point, I think that becomes inevitable, and like, that's how it has to be. Like, especially when there's, I mean, it needs to be codified. It needs to be codified eventually when you have when we have formal rules in the blockchain. Like, formal rules need formal protocols, and it needs to say like, this is the specific consensus mechanism that we're using to give permission for this ability to do something directly on the blockchain or something like that. And one of the things I wanted to bring it to was that, like, I agree with you currently, like they're signaling mechanisms because they're just starting. There's not that precedent and so forth, and need time to evolve, especially when they're in these early stages. But eventually they need to be codified, and eventually we need to agree, even if it's a combination of two consensus processes or something like that. But in the meantime, and I think at all times, it's always helpful to have more consensus measuring processes available so you can measure it in different ways. But eventually there needs to be ones that selected formal power. But then in the meantime, when we're just starting, I think that until there's codified formal power that's given to a consensus process, like, proposals are always really to the individuals who have formal power in the community. So that's something I tried to explain in the consensus article that I wrote. Like, say if, I don't know, say if somebody has a website and people want to like manage that community website within the community, then whoever is ultimately like the owner of the website using the current Web2 system with ICANN or whatever, like, they have the power. And so all proposals are really like, it's a proposal for the community to vote on and express the shared opinion of the community. And it's a proposal to that person who has the website. And then they could say, yeah, that's a great idea. I'll do that. I'm going with the consensus of the community. Or if they have a different idea, then they could say, oh, I don't really know about that. Maybe this or maybe not. Or somebody else can just start a different website if people really disagree. But that's just something I kind of want to add on top of that. Just to make it clear, like, because the way I was originally thinking about it was like, the community was making proposals and the community is deciding, but really until there's formal power for the community to do so, it's always the community's kind of making proposals to the community to express opinions to individuals. Does that make sense, you think? And do you agree?
Yeah, it makes sense. Like, if a community reaches consensus and individuals respect the community members and the community, then we will naturally follow the past proposals, I think. And I think that should be enough. Who knows how it will look in the future? I'm not that sure. like like how it will be codified and stuff. I'm, I'm I'm not sure about that, but for now, I think it's the correct way to look at this.
I agree that it'll work out quite well, I think, in this way. But it's also just helpful to, I suppose, just to set expectations and set boundaries and so forth, because like there could be situations in which an individual greatly respects the community, but just doesn't feel comfortable with an individual action that the community is proposing. And I think that it's just helpful to just let that be known. So both the community respects the individual's rights and opinions, and the individual respects the community rights and opinions and so forth. And people can always understand that if they, for whatever reason, aren't in agreement with something, then they can both opt out of doing that and then work with a different community member on that particular proposal or matter that is willing to do so how the community wants.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Yeah.
I suppose we could take it two different directions. I think it's probably best to focus more on the Eden+Fractal proposal, although you mentioned a couple of times you have the fractal blockchains new article too, which is really interesting. So I'd like to give you the opportunity if you'd like to share anything about that prior to the introduction to the fractal blockchains, or anything about Albedo, really, if you want to guide or lead in any other way. But if not, then I'd also like to ask you some more specifics about the Eden+Fractal proposal. Like I had a couple of technical questions, like for example, why do you think that it's best to have the councils operating only over 4 weeks? Like maybe, I know the Practically white paper has like 6 weeks or 12 weeks, and also the interim consensus processes that Dan Lamb proposed for the Genesis Fractal were longer in time frame. So that was one of the things that stuck out to me. But yeah, I'm happy to go in either direction. Would you like to focus on the Eden+Fractal stuff, or would you like to talk about anything else?
I think it makes sense to keep talking about Eden+Fractal, and for those that want to learn more about Albedo and fractal blockchains, we will have, like you mentioned, an interview with Patrick later this week, and I think he will publish on October 22 or 23rd, so people can learn more information about there.
Okay, sounds great. I agree. Everybody check out the interview when it comes out. So yeah, do you have any thoughts about this first kind of question, or first thing I was wondering about with regards to the timeline, the 4 weeks? Do you think that this will be, I mean, I could see benefit in starting it small and then, potentially working up. And I can also see flexibility, like you can make decisions faster and have more effect. If it's a longer timeline, then people you elect will have less power. So I could see some benefits to having shorter, but I can also see benefits to having longer too. So did you think much about the timeline, about 4 weeks? And do you think that's something that might be increased or changed at some point in the future?
Yeah, I thought about it. I thought about making it 6 weeks, but the reason I didn't, I think you touched on it when you said, like if it's 6 weeks, then it means that the delegate you elect will have the power longer, and I don't think if 6 weeks is not too long, that would be more than 1 month or 1 month and a half, and in that time community could change opinions, and yeah, so I think there are benefits to keeping delegates uh, like recent, not yeah. So that I wanted the consensus to be more recent. I think for organization like Eden Fractal, it's there are benefits to being able to move fast, pivot fast, and so on. And I think that will 4 weeks. It's not like you give less power to the community in if you only elect delegates for 4 weeks. Uh, you just yeah, I think it gives more power to the community because any particular delegate stays longer in the consensus making process.
Right. How much do you, and maybe this is asking a question that's not really answerable right now, but how much do you think is that this proposal will evolve over time? Like, do you expect that the way that you outlined it will be like working well on its own for a long time without evolving or changing much, or do you expect that this process may evolve fairly rapidly as we go along and try different things?
Right now, the way it seems to me that it could stay stable for quite a long time, and we could build proposals around it, which formalize other procedures like how to reach consensus on the agenda that we have each meeting and so on. I think it could be like the basis. I think there are benefits to keeping to having one core consensus process which doesn't change too much, and when having additional processes around it. That's the way I'm thinking about it right now. But of course, this is also up to consensus of the community to decide how this evolves.
Okay, cool. Sounds good. Makes sense. Another thing I was wondering too is like some technical questions, like some edge cases. What happens if people who are elected as delegates don't show up at meetings? Like, say if I was elected or you're elected as a delegate 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago, and then you have things that pop up in the current meeting, and so you're not able to attend. I presume, to some extent that would just be a signal, like maybe you don't want to elect that person as a delegate in the future again if they won't be reliably joining the meeting. But also at the same time, that doesn't necessarily solve the potential problem that's caused in the immediate moment. Like say if that happens with two of the different groups, there's 4 total councils from the past 4 weeks, and maybe the first 2 councils, like that, maybe they don't have the full 4 people on the council or 3 people on the council or however many people. Maybe they only have 1 or 2 people. During that current time, like, do you think that, or also what happens if there's only 2 delegates in there? Like, do they have to reach 2 of 2 consensus in order to pass a proposal? Yeah, so there's a couple questions I think that are here that I've been kind of bumming into one, but basically what happens when people can't participate? And do you see that as a potential risk to the community that there might not be a sufficient amount of council members to come to consensus with this proposal?
Yeah, so first of all, yeah, that when people are electing delegates, that should be like a requirement and expectation that delegate is committing to attend the meetings, to participate in governance. I mean, that's obvious. If you're getting elected, that's like becomes like your responsibility. And of course, like you said, that doesn't fully solve the problem. There will still be occasions when some delegate cannot participate. But the worst that can happen is that community won't be passing new proposals. It doesn't at least allow passing. It doesn't make it easier for community to pass proposals without uh, having agreement from most of the delegates. Yeah, so I think it's unlikely that a lot of delegates will, if the community is active, I don't think it's likely that a lot of delegates will not attend often.
Right. Another thing I was wondering too is about how it scales too. So I'm wondering, like, right now, I'd say on average we probably have like 15, maybe 18 people. So there's usually 3 groups. So I suppose that would make it so there's councils of 3 people where 2 or 3 people have to agree. In some cases, there's only been 12 people. That's happened once or twice. And so in that case, it'd only be 2 people on the council, which I think you shook your head yes to say that if there's only 2 people, then basically they'd have to reach 2 out of 2 consensus in order to approve a proposal. That's correct.
Yes.
Right? Yeah, okay. So like, and as we scale, like I can imagine, say if we have 50 people or 100 people who are at the meeting, then there'll be more and more groups and more council members. So I'm just kind of exploring it. I'm also just thinking about this, and I suppose to some extent we'll just have to see as it goes. But do you see it scaling well? Like, because right now it seems like it's going to be fairly centralized, although the community has power to select different delegates and so forth. So it is quite decentralized in the beginning, but still much more centralized than it will be like with 100 people. Like the mechanism naturally decentralizes more, gives more gives more power to more participants as there's more people. So like for one thing, I mean, there could be potential edge cases, like if the community grows really fast, like potential attack vectors even on the uh, attack vectors, because I think that what you wrote about fractal blockchains and how 51% attacks are only attacks from the perspective of participants who have like expectations and not the protocol itself. But like say for example, there could be like if just 100 people showed up at a meeting one day who didn't have the best interest of the community at heart, then they could potentially kind of like get a lot of the delegate power and stuff like that. But of course, that's kind of a crazy scenario that I don't think would happen because there's really not much at stake, not much that people would want to do that right now. But yeah, I'm just wondering in general, I guess, just kind of sharing my thoughts as I'm thinking this through. But how do you see it scaling? And do you see it scaling well and gracefully as we go from 15 people on average for a while, and then perhaps grow to 20 or 30 or 50 or 100 and so forth? Do you have thoughts about the how it will scale?
Yeah, that's good questions. So I would like to d divide it into actually two questions. So first is how do we protect against like larger growth, like where one meeting you have 12, the other like 50 more people come and we like try to influence consensus of a community. Uh, I think that's one of the concerns that you had. So yes, regarding this particular problem, I see it. It's partly in all the fractals. Like fractals should have some rules for how it deals with this situation, and this particular consensus process, uh, it kind of protects against this by giving each council an equal power. Uh, See, that's the reason why one option was for me to say that each week certain number of delegates are elected, and so in 4 weeks you would have dynamic council of delegates from all 4 weeks, and you would try to reach consensus among those delegates. But in this proposal, what you have is council reaches consensus, and that council has vote equal to one, the same power that councils from other weeks. So what this means is that if you have one meeting where 15 people come, it will still that week will still have the same power as the other 3 weeks, because you have to reach consensus among the councils. So if people want to attack the fractal like this, they would have to, a lot of people would have to come on all 4 weeks, basically. At which point maybe they are part of the community, if they become frequent attenders, if the community does not kick them out some way and they keep attending, maybe we are part of the community. Although that's like that's still an open question, like how Eden+Fractal protects from people who come to the meetings and are not really helpful, who don't really care about the community. But you have this problem either way, even before my consensus process. And regarding the other part, where how it scales, if it scales gradually, if growth is happening gradually, I think it scales pretty well. I don't think it will get decentralized. I don't think it will get centralized because more people in each consensus meeting will mean more breakout groups. That will mean more delegates. more councils. No, not more councils, but more delegates in each council. So essentially, what we care about is that people will always have. If you are attending every meeting, you will, at all times you will have 4 delegates because each week you have been at 4 breakout groups, and so that doesn't change. However many people come. Uh, yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, very interesting perspectives. And yeah, so thanks for sharing that. And that is good to keep in mind. And I think it's also good for everybody who's participating in these meetings too, and working with Eden+Fractal to understand some of these dynamics as well. Just to understand how we're doing it. But to touch on a couple of your points, one, as far as like people joining the group who don't have the best interests of the community at heart, well, one, like you said, they could, if they join more often, then they could become more of the community and get along with everybody more and cooperate with everyone more. Also, of course, at some point, these processes could be used to qualify participants. So right now, just anybody who wants to join can join, but potentially there could be a qualification process, like in kind of legacy cooperative systems, like jobs and employment and so forth. There's interview processes and so forth. It's not like anybody can come to work for a company, and perhaps Eden+Fractal could evolve into something like that, where people could have to pass some sort of qualification process, be approved by the consensus process to be able to join and participate. Something that could be a potential in the future, depending on the growth and so forth, that could also affect that. And then having it where I think it's quite elegant, where there's the 4 different councils, so they have power to make decisions and so forth. And then just an interesting thing to think about is, like, fractally consensus process outlined in the white paper, it always has, I suppose, 12 people who are making decisions, because of 12 team leaders, basically. Whereas this, in some ways, is more fractal, which is interesting, and it becomes much more decentralized, because you have like potentially, say, if you had 1,000 people in the Eden+Fractal and participating, and then 1,000 people with groups of 6, that would be something like 180 breakout rooms and 180 delegates, which would mean you'd have to get something like 120 delegates to approve something in their council. And then that would just be one of the 4 councils to approve something. So it's very interesting how it's fractal and expands like that. And it's something that I suppose is good to keep in mind too, just difference in how this decentralizes over time much more than the fractally process in the white paper, I think. Would you agree with that, how I described that?
Yeah, I see that it seems to me more fractal as well, like the way councils are elected and the way we have power. And another thing to add, that fractally white paper actually describes a kind of protection against many people coming and influencing, attacking the fractal. We have an invitation system, I think, where you have the more respect you earn, the more invitations you get. So you kind of that's one way to protect.
Right. Cool. Yeah, I don't remember the invitation system. I remember the referral system, but I'll have to look back into that. But that might be something interesting for the Genesis fractal, or for the Eden fractal to look into as well.
Maybe it's a referral system, but I think it can be used like that.
Yeah, it certainly can make sense. Okay, cool. Another thing that I wanted to ask you, and one of my first thoughts, I mentioned that, like, I really love the idea, and I think it's got a lot of great breakthroughs. But at first, I was like, this is pretty confusing, just because it was the first time that I read it, and I was like, one of the things I like about the fractal, about the fractal process that we've been doing in Eden+Fractal so far, and the Genesis fractal and the Alien Worlds fractal, is that it's very simple. Like, there's a simple game, basically. That's how I explain it to people. I'm like, basically, people come together, we break out into groups of 5 or 6, and we play a game where we elect, or not where we elect. We play a game where we just rank each other's contributions 1 through 6. And I love the elegance of that, the simplicity of that. Like, it sounds fun and it sounds simple. It's like you come and you just play a game. But then I was like, well, if you do this, then it's kind of, I guess, in a bit of a way, convoluting it a bit, because now it's like you're not just playing the game where you're ranking contributions 1 through 6, but you're also electing a delegate as well. And then as I thought about it more and I saw all the benefits of the idea, I was like, I think it's definitely worth it for the trade-off, but it does add a bit of complexity in explaining it. So I'm wondering if you had any thoughts about that. Like I'm often thinking about just, for somebody who's not very familiar or like really getting into the details of architecting these design systems and so forth, like we want to be able to explain it as simply as possible and provide a fun experience where people don't feel like over encumbered with, oh, what do I have to do? I have to do this, I have to do that. So do you feel like this, I think it is quite easy to explain right now, but I'd be curious to hear your thoughts about this. If this is something you've thought about, if you think like for somebody who's coming to the meeting new, do you think it's easy to explain? And would you explain it by basically just saying like we're playing this game, or we're doing this process where we're ranking each other's contributions, and then also at the same time we're also electing somebody to help make decisions as a delegate? Is that basically how you'd explain it? And do you think that's a good way to like simply explain it to new people who are joining the community for the first time?
Well, you make a good point. Like there is no denying that this complicates electing delegates, complicates the process a bit. But what we see in Eden+Fractal, what I saw and what I think you saw too, that people want a governance process. They want a way to make decisions. We don't just want to reward contribution points. So the way I see it, there could be use cases where only uh, where only this rewarding contributions happen and not when electing delegates. But that kind of fractal, I think it will not have as efficient governance because basically, yes, it's complicated. Electing delegates complicates it, but the alternative is voting. So alternative is people potentially not getting informed, not participating, and so you have those problems. Yeah, so that's why I think if Fractal wants to make decisions, have governance, make decisions of what's the future, then I think it's worth it. And regarding presenting it as a game, well, there are always it's always worth thinking about ways to present it to people in a gamified kind of way, so that it's fun for them and that they learn faster.
Great. Yeah. So I agree with everything you said there. I think everything. But to play devil's advocate, maybe. So like in the other proposals that were mentioned, like you previously made a proposal whereby I believe it was like the people who have the highest average level of respect over the past 6 weeks can make decisions, can form a council with 6 people. I also had previously made a proposal where people can just vote directly with the tokens that people earn, like having a votes token or something like that, where people can vote in consortium, where people would still be able to make governance decisions, but wouldn't have the extra decision making needed or instructions needed during the actual meeting to elect a delegate as well. So it is possible to make decisions for the community and make governance decisions without having the election of a delegate as well, and to retain the simplicity of the fractal process. I think overall, like those other methods have a lot of things that the Eden+Fractal process lacks, and so I think it's overall worth it. But that is something helpful to consider. I think that there is a trade-off there a bit. But yeah, just to provide a bit of extra color. Do you have any thoughts about that? I think we're in agreement that it's worth it to make the trade-off and make it a little bit more complex, and we can still explain it very simply. Just add an extra sentence. Oh, and we elect a delegate. But then we get all these benefits from that too. It's a little bit extra work, but we get lots of benefits that aren't possible with the previous proposals of you just top 6 people with respect and so forth, or voting with it. Like there's benefits like decoupling the respect given from the governance and so forth. So lots of benefits. Do you have thoughts about this?
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like, and I arrived at this by listening to the community. Like with my previous proposal, a lot of people weren't happy that the power is centralized in those few delegates, top 6, which are top contributors. With voting again, I see that you then have a problem like how to select the threshold for voting, and this doesn't have this problem. So yeah, I think it, like you said, it adds a bit of complexity, but for a lot of fractals, I think it's worth it.
I agree. And I think it only adds a little bit of complexity, really, when we figure out how to explain it well. And I think it makes the game more fun in some ways because, sometimes games are more fun when there's more complexity, as long as that complexity is well managed and well described and so forth. And it's not much more complexity. It's just like adding on, and you elect a delegate to make decisions. And then that brings up all sorts of stuff where, like during the meetings, like we're talking about how you could talk about these proposals or who is going to be the best job at representing the community decisions and so forth. So cool. I just thought that's helpful to explore, but I completely agree with what you're saying. I think you said before that you had about a half hour, and I think we probably have something like 5 minutes left there. So if you'd like to wrap it up now, we can, or if you'd like to go a little bit longer, we can too. Perhaps a way to close it. I know we'll have our interview with Patrick where we'll discuss more about this and Albedo and the fractal blockchains. And I think that we're also doing another interview with Patrick where we're discussing Eden+Fractal in general and providing updates. So I'm looking forward to those interviews very much. I encourage people to check them out and also check out links in the description. I'm very also interested. I mean, we kind of just jumped right into the specifics of like all these different proposals and stuff like that. At some point, Tadas, I think it'd be great to just talk more generally, just like where you see Eden+Fractal going, and then also just like what your goals are in life. I know we talked about that a little bit, and what you're excited about, all sorts of different things, lots of exciting things I'm excited to explore with you at some point. But I appreciate their conversation here very much. And I think it was really good to focus on specifics of these consensus processes and Eden+Fractal and so forth. Yeah. Is there anything else that you'd like to discuss here now?
No, I think we can leave there are a lot of stuff to discuss. I think we won't be able to cover everything today in one day.
Yes.
So I think we can leave a lot for the future.
That's good. I agree. Yeah, I'm looking forward to discussing a lot more in the future, both in all of our weekly meetings on Wednesdays, and then on the Patrick interviews on NovaCrypto, and then it'd be cool to get together and do another one of these sometimes too, to go more in depth in all these different things. But yeah, I suppose we can wrap it up then, and then I'll say thank you everybody for watching, and thank you so much to Das. Do you have any final words or places you'd like to refer? Like if you want people to check out like the Albedo proposal or your Twitter account or anything like that?
I don't have prepared places where people could go. Well, I think we can follow me on Twitter. It's either Taduxt or Albedo chain Albedo actually.
Okay.
Yeah, so and thanks for this discussion, and I hope to have more in the future.
Cool. Sounds great. I agree too. I'll provide those links in the description. We were also talking about beforehand. I'm going to work on just helping to curate some of the stuff that you're working on the Eden Creator site too. So I'll provide links there, and I'm happy to just provide the text too if you want to put it up anywhere. But yeah, thanks to Das. I really appreciate this conversation. I think it was a really good conversation. And yeah, I'm really excited about this Eden+Fractal process too. And I think it has the potential to be bringing together Eden process, selection process, and fractal process fractally, and making it Eden+Fractal, and like being like a really beautiful synergy that's really helpful for people cooperating and so forth. So yeah, I'm stoked about it. And thank you so much to Das for putting together this proposal, and also all the great things you're doing in the community with Albedo and everything else, and also for this great conversation. So thank you very much.
Thank you.